Now from Atlanta News First Plus, this is Sports Tonight.
Welcome to Sports Tonight on this Monday. I'm sports producer Scott Pennyman here with sports director Bailey Burmaster. Bailey, how you feeling?
I'm feeling good. It's Monday and we have a lot to discuss.
Are you feeling Monday? Is it one of those dreary,
Probably because of the weather. It is a little chilly outside. It's a little dreary. But It doesn't feel like a Monday in like a sense of like, it's Monday. So.
I know. That's cool. Hey, I tell you what, let's really get right to it here. So let's start our first topic.
Let's do it.
Obviously, Brock Bowers, probably the biggest news we have around here, right? So Brock Bowers undergoes surgery on his ankle. Now, the typical recovery time, well, after the injury he suffered against Vanderbilt, had to leave that game. So they said typically the recovery time is 4 to 6 weeks for this kind of operation, for this kind of surgery. So I guess when you look at things, maybe I guess you could say short-term or long-term, first from the UGA standpoint, I think they'll be able to survive this. I think they'll be fine, but interested to hear what you think.
So I think this is the worst loss for this team they could experience. I don't want to say they can't fill the gap. You know, I think Oscar Delp will have to step up. I think Ladd McConkey will have to also step up. I was talking to Drew Butler on our SEC wrap-up show that, if Brock is down a long time, that Ladd's going to have to step up. But the concern with that is, one, I feel like he's been a shadow of himself from last season. Yeah. He was really that go-to receiver, and he has not been that guy this year. Now, granted, he has been dealing with that back injury, and even Kirby said after the game against Vanderbilt that Ladd isn't 100%. Now, they are going into their bye, and they're going to have some time to get healthy. But, I mean, I think it's a huge loss to lose Brock. And I think the reality is you can sit here and say 4 to 6 weeks. That basically, if it's 6 weeks, backs them up to the SEC championship game. And at that point, that's if it all goes as well. And I would question that if you're Brock, you're obviously probably going to the draft after this. Why would you even come back for 1 or 2 more games? Now, granted, I get you could be contending for another national championship, but is that worth the cost of coming back too early and hurting yourself more?
That was going to be my take. I was really just thinking about, obviously he has this operation and maybe he can come back and play for a national championship if they make the playoffs or whatever. I mean, probably won't make it for the SEC championship game, I'm guessing.
It seems unlikely. I mean, we're going to talk about the whole Aaron Rodgers thing.
Right.
Who knows how this surgery goes? Who knows? There's not a whole lot we do know right now.
Right.
Georgia put out a very vague statement that he was just he had surgery.
Surprise.
And he's correct. And he's going to make a full recovery. There's no timetable, but for this type of injury, it's 4 to 6 weeks. That's assuming everything goes well. I would actually be very surprised if we saw him again this season.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at. Look, I mean, like you said, what hasn't he done in college football already, right? He's been a big part of 2 national championship football teams while at UGA. Already won the Mackey Award. Been All-American.
I mean, and think about this. God forbid he comes back and tries to, wherever Georgia ends up, assuming they even make the playoff. I mean, it looks likely, but just saying, hypotheticals here. If they make the playoff, is that worth, if you come back early, get injured again, or have another setback, is that worth not going to the combine for?
I don't think so.
I don't.
No, I think if you're a young player and you really feel like you haven't accomplished a lot yet, and you haven't accomplished what Brock Bowers has accomplished, then maybe try to fight your way back and get back on the field. But I think we saw this last year. I know, of course, obviously being an Ohio State fan, with Jackson Smith and Jigba last year for Ohio State, where he kind of suffered some injuries throughout the season. He was always kind of hurt. And he just said, guys, look, it's been real. I enjoyed my time here, but I got to go. So, and I think that's not only what Brock Bowers will do, but knowing the kind of guy he is, he seems like the kind of guy that wants to get back and play. But I think once someone sits him down and talks to him a little bit, once they just sort of take a step back and look at these things and do what's smart in this situation.
And I don't think anyone will fault him for that.
No.
I mean, his future's very bright.
Right.
Could be one of the highest tight ends drafted since Kyle Pitts. So
yeah, he's going to be at the least top 7 or 8 draft pick, right? because of the position he plays. Otherwise, he probably would be hired based on the kind of impactful player that he's been. But yeah, I just think at this point you do what's smart. And I think that we're at a point now in college football. I mean, obviously back in the day, I think guys would be like, he needs to tough it out and return. He needs to come back. But I think kind of where we're at now in college football, I think these coaches are smart, and I think they understand that he needs to do what's best for him from a business standpoint.
It's a different game now.
Yeah,
it's a different game.
So, but I think as far as UGA and where they're going, I like how they've been working at Oscar Delp, his backup at tight end. They seem to be fine. I think the offense will be fine. Probably not as explosive as it's been with Brock, but I think they'll be fine overall.
This is what I'll say, too. I think I've been fair but critical of Carson Beck to this point. I think he's been very consistent, but you have yet to see that real moment where he can take the reins and go win a football game if needed. But I think he's been really consistent for the offense, and that's when you're not too high, not too low, that can be a really good thing. But I do think moving forward, especially with the next couple stretches of game, which is their hardest games. They have Florida, they have Tennessee still, they have Ole Miss. That's going to be a lot harder than what they've seen, especially without Brock Bowers. I think Carson Beck is going to have to take it to another level.
I agree. And I think he will. I think he's shown so far that he can do what's needed for the team to win, and I think he will. So let's go from a team who hasn't lost in a few years to a team who lost yesterday.
Yeah.
Atlanta Falcons yesterday fall to the Commanders. Tough one. And so if we're already on you weren't sure about Desmond Ridder bus, you're now walking to the front of that bus now after yesterday's performance. 3 interceptions, 2 of them late in the fourth quarter. I was right in the end zone for both, especially that second to last interception that he threw. It was a bad one. Just a rough day for Desmond Ridder as a whole.
I think if you go back and watch the tape too, Arthur Smith's face after those last 2 interceptions tell you everything.
Yeah.
When you don't win the turnover margin, it's going to be very hard to even come out with a win. 3 interceptions is just not good enough. I think what's really hard is Ridder had arguably the best game he's had against the Texans last week, and you thought he was going to build a lot off of that. And then to come and be home against the Commanders, who aren't that good of a team, and throw 3 interceptions and just not have the production that needs to be had. You know where I stand. We've talked about Ridder in depth. It has not changed. I still think we see Taylor Heineke at some point this season, especially if that's how you're playing at home. That just can't happen. That's where everyone's been saying Desmond Ridder that's his bread and butter, is being home and feeling more comfortable there. And I mean, what else is there to say?
Yeah, and look, it was tough yesterday. That was unexpected. I sat here on this show on Friday and all but guaranteed a win against the Commanders because I just knew that they weren't going to be able to come in. The Falcons, they've been playing pretty well. So just looking at how the Falcons have been playing the last few games, looking how, like you said, how Ridder had seemingly taken steps to be a franchise quarterback, especially guiding a game-winning drive last week that led to a game-winning field goal. I thought we were going to see a continuation of what we saw in the previous week. And like I say, if you weren't for Desmond Ridder at all up to this point, yesterday you were still holding that opinion because he made some kind of bizarre decisions yesterday for those interceptions. I mean, that one he threw at the end zone that he sort of lofted up, and that was a really bad decision, period. Not just a bad decision, but a really bad throw. So, and they really blew a classic opportunity to beat a team who they should have beat yesterday. And it's going to be one of those games that
you wish you had back.
Yeah, like if you get late in the season and you're a game back of winning the division and making the playoffs, you're going to look back at games like yesterday and go, we should have had that one.
Absolutely. I think it's going to listen, every team has a couple of those games, 1 or 2. But they're detrimental, and if you have more than 1 or 2, you're now talking the chances of you missing a playoff. And I do believe this Falcons team, if they had a more consistent quarterback, is a playoff team. I think they have a defense that's 10 times better, that's keeping them in games, and they're an amazing unit that's really come together since last season. I think Jerry Gray has been a big part of that as well, and Jesse Bates. But the reality is if you're throwing 3 picks and having really bad lofty balls and not finding consistency with your receivers or in the passing game, you're going to struggle. And it's an interesting division. The Bucs have been decent. Saints right there. Panthers are irrelevant, but these are games.
Wow.
These are games you can't lose.
So it's the Bucks next week, right? So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's to me that's a really good matchup. I mean, when you think about, I don't know if anyone expected both these teams to be 3-win teams headed into their first matchup with each other. Falcons at 3-3, Bucks at 3-2. But yeah, I mean, I think the Buccaneers have kind of gotten surprising play a little bit out of Baker Mayfield, who's for the most part, I think he's been up this season, but he's typical up and down Baker. You know?
Well, I think where Baker plays his best ball is one when his back's against the wall a little bit,
Or like Dodson.
or when he feels like he has something to prove. And this is that 1 year in Tampa where he's trying to prove he can still be a starting quarterback, and it's worked out. Now the division is weak, so that helps. But they won on the road against the Vikings, but that's because everyone thought the Vikings were a pretty good team.
Yeah.
They're not really a good team anymore.
They fooled us.
And they lost Justin Jefferson, killing my fantasy team.
Oh, man. He'll
But
be back.
but I think it's going to be a really interesting game, and I think it's going to be a testament to this Falcons team.
Yeah, I mean, that's two pretty evenly matched teams. Tampa kind of has really, to me, been playing with very little expectations because I think coming into the season, people probably thought they pretty much got Baker to tank for the rest of the year. They're probably going to win 3 or 4 games. Everybody's going to be fired, and then they'll have a top draft pick next year and maybe get Caleb Williams or something. So I think that's the way they looked at things coming into the season. But here they are, surprise, surprise. Like you said, Baker takes these situations personally. So lo and behold, now they're in the race to maybe win the division. So, yeah, I mean, that could be a really interesting game next week. I always think that's an interesting dynamic when thinking about Baker, though, because just think about some of the quarterbacks that have like gotten long-term extensions in the National Football League so far. I mean, look at like Daniel Jones. Someone looked at him and said, we're going to give him $43 million a year. But Baker seems to be bouncing around, who I think he's been a better quarterback than guys like that.
Yeah, I mean,
It's kind of crazy how that's worked out.
I guess the Giants are down bad because I would have never given him that contract. I don't know what to say to that. I think it goes back to the tiers of quarterbacks that are in this league.
Yeah.
And I think there's a few great ones, the Patrick Mahomes, the Joe Burrows, the Aaron Rodgers. Then I think there's the better than mediocre, if you want to go with the Dak Prescotts and Kirk Cousins and those caliber. And then there's just like other quarterbacks. I don't even want to say they're bad because they wouldn't be in the league.
Just middle of the road.
But they're there and they're going to do their best, and they have great games and then they have not great games.
You make them sound like they're little league. He's there.
It's the reality, and you're only going to win so many games with that quarterback. So that's why a lot of people look towards, the draft to see who's coming in and who's going to be worth it. But the reality is a lot of times you can't predict it.
Yeah, that's true. So, look, as you look at yesterday's NFL action, I thought yesterday was a bizarre day in the NFL from a lot of different standpoints. I mean, the two teams that look like the biggest juggernauts all season long, the 49ers and the Eagles, fall yesterday in surprise losses, shock losses. Both of those games were on the road, though, as the Eagles got beat by the Jets. And then the 49ers missed a last-second field goal to
the Browns.
To the Cleveland Browns.
To P.J. Walker.
P.J. Walker and the Cleveland Browns.
But can we agree, because I know you're a Browns fan, that is the most, Cleveland game for the best team to come into your stadium to be so close down to the wire, miss field goal with a quarterback that isn't Deshaun Watson, and somehow you miss that game. Now, what that means, though, and you can disagree, but I think you'll agree with me. There's going to be one game they should absolutely win, and they are going to lose it.
No, you read
It's already
my mind.
happened once, but it's going to happen again. They lost to the Steelers. They should have won that game. Steelers aren't that good. Kenny Pickett.
I'll waver on that one a little bit because that's a divisional opponent. Those divisional matchups those divisional matchups are quirky. I mean, you could
No, they are.
out,
I'm not saying they're not.
Right.
But, dude, let's be real.
I thought they would win the game, yes.
Correct. That
Yes.
Steelers team is not good. Kenny Pickett,
For
maybe
sure,
his hands are too small. I don't know what it is, but it's not working out.
They scratched out 3 wins, though, man. I think that's a testament to Mike Tomlin and what he is as a head coach.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with you.
They finally scratch some wins out, man. I don't know how they have, but they have. But, yeah, I mean.
I know we have other topics, but I do want to talk about Deshaun Watson for a millisecond.
No, we're good. Go for it.
How do you feel about that? Because I'm sorry.
So-
if we paid you $230 million and
I would do Sports Tonight 5 times a week if I got 230. Seriously, no problem. Let's just do it. No, look, I mean, yes. I mean, I've been one of those people, and people who follow me on social media, they know, I've been one of those people who are sort of, look, let me be clear. I wanted Deshaun Watson as the Browns quarterback because I feel like he was the best option to play quarterback. I was appreciative of Baker Mayfield and his contributions to the team for as long as he was. I liked him as a quarterback, but I also understand that Deshaun Watson was a better quarterback. So I was happy that they made whatever move they had to make to get him. But with that comes a certain level of expectation. So I think that when you're the leader of a franchise, and make no mistake, he's the leader of that franchise. He's probably the second most important person in that building behind D and Jimmy Haslam. Mm-hmm. I think there's a tone that you must set. So I think that, yes, you're expected to play through some bumps and bruises, not injuries. If you're injured, you're not expected to play. But I think if you have bumps and bruises, you're supposed to lead by example and make sure that you're out there on the field. But we also talked before about the only reason he's there in the first place is because you paid him a tremendous amount of money. Because remember, when he was deciding what teams he wanted to go to, he had kicked Cleveland out of the running because he didn't want to go there flat out until they came.
It was too cold.
Right, it was too cold. It just wasn't.
It's soft.
It wasn't his kind of vibe. So I understand that. I know I'm from there. It wasn't his kind of vibe. You've worked there. We all know what Cleveland is. It wasn't his kind of vibe, right? So I understand that. But then they offer him a ridiculous amount of money, so then he comes. So in that situation, you may buy someone's body, but you're not buying their heart. So if you don't have their heart, are they really going to play through any pains and injuries? I don't know.
The Browns have no one to blame but themselves, because why would you get someone's heart when you're going to pay them $230 million? I don't need any other reason to come to Cleveland than that price tag, period.
Sure, but and like I say, but
and I think you could tell Stefanski was a little...
He was upset.
Rubbed the wrong way by it.
For sure.
It was kind of like, you've been talking the talk, we've paid you the money, you're supposed to be here doing what we've asked, and now this?
Because you didn't buy his heart. That's the thing. If this was somewhere where he legitimately, truly wanted to be, then I think that's when you'll play through injuries. That's when you'll play through being a little bit banged up. But when you only showed up somewhere because of the money, now I don't know that you have that same motivation to play through some things. I don't doubt that he's banged up, that his shoulder hurts. Mm-hmm. But I think that your willingness to play through things like that go hand in hand with your willingness to really be somewhere. Mm-hmm. You know? And so I guess, for lack of a better term, I don't know if he loved him like that. That's all I'm saying. So,
I think the only person he maybe do love like that is himself.
Hey, and his money, right?
And the money.
But I'm happy he's the quarterback still. So I'm willing to look at this and see where this goes, right?
Yep.
So before we go to your on the clock segment, let's talk about Aaron Rodgers here. Kind of startling, right? I mean, report comes out on CBSSports.com that he might be ready for a return from his torn Achilles in Week 15. He was throwing the ball yesterday before the game.
I don't know if I believe this.
You're skeptical?
I'm skeptical. I feel like this is totally an Aaron Rodgers ploy of being like, oh, I'm going to be back by Week 15. Like, I'm healing. I'm doing great. Like, almost manifesting himself to health, which, like...
Well, you covered the man, right? So
I do, and listen, if anyone's probably going to accomplish it, I could see it being Aaron Rodgers. But, like, the human body is the human body, and he's not a young 20-something-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, he's 43, 42?
Yeah.
And the Achilles is, like, a huge injury. It takes a long time for people to come back. I know he had this innovative surgery.
Like a year, isn't it?
Yeah, but I don't know if I'm totally sold on it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if anything, maybe what he's trying to do here is he's trying to keep his team motivated throughout the season, right?
Okay.
So I think maybe this is him being a leader, which he is, he's been a star quarterback for a lot of years. So I think this is him being the alpha dog leader, trying to rally the troops. He wants them to continue to have something to aim for and shoot for the rest of the season. So if you're a guy on that defense, if you're a guy on that team, and you just think Aaron Rodgers, it may be a small chance that Aaron Rodgers may work his way back for Week 15 or even end of the season, that's enough to keep you motivated week in and week out to stay in the playoff race, hoping and praying that Rodgers makes his way back.
I think that's a really fair take, and I think it's I think it's very well could be what they're doing, especially with, Zach trying to lead the way and it kind of being a mess. Give them something to fight for, give them a possibility.
Yeah.
So, I don't hate that take. I don't think he's returning. Maybe I'll be wrong, but.
Yeah, I just feel like, and look at them. They played inspired yesterday. It worked. He was on the field throwing the ball around, playing catch with his teammates, and look at that. They upset the Eagles. The Eagles the Eagles have looked unstoppable the entire season, especially with that brotherly shove that they do right on third.
The tush push. The tush push.
And they really just smacked them around yesterday. People talk about how good. There's been some really good defenses this season. The Browns' defense have been really good. The Jets' defense, when those guys are focused and ready to go, they have a really good defense, and they really gave Jalen Hurts fits yesterday. And I said Desmond. He was playing like Desmond, wasn't he? I'm sorry.
Shots fired.
I'm sorry.
Shots fired.
No, but Jalen Hurts, that was really like his worst game of the season. You can kind of credit that Jets defense. So whatever Aaron Rodgers is doing, maybe it's working. I don't know, but. Okay. Let's get you on the clock segment.
Yeah, all right. So on the clock, a new segment we do on the SEC Wrap Show. We talk a lot of topics about college football and Georgia in general. Drew Butler joined me. We talk about Brock Bowers and who needs to step up. We talk about the scariest stadiums. There's a lot of content. So make sure you tune into our SEC Wrap shows on Saturday following the 3:30 game. It's a good time. It's a lot of content. Good for you guys. But let's go over to that on the clock segment.
You know what it is by now. On the clock, we have a list of topics we're going to banter and debate about surrounding Georgia and just college football in general. We're going to put Drew on the clock. He has no idea what's coming, so let's just jump right in. How concerned are you about Brock Bowers' ankle injury?
Yeah, today during the game, I was very concerned. But in the post-game press conference, it seems like this is a lower ankle sprain. It doesn't seem that serious. Obviously, they're going to have x-rays. This bye week is coming at a perfect time for Georgia. Brock's going to get a week and a half to get off his feet, get some really good rehab in there. Hopefully he'll be good to go for the Florida game.
And the bye week needs to come soon because they have a few injuries. I think a lot of people could use some rest, so it will be much needed. We're halfway through Georgia's SEC schedule. They're 4-0 in conference play, but it hasn't always been perfect. How would you grade Georgia, their team as a whole, so far?
It's a great question. I'm going to go with a B+. They're 7-0, 4-0 in the conference. Again, they're 40-1 in their last 41 games. This is an unprecedented run. And what it tells you is that Georgia is going to get every team's best shot. The odds are now against the Dogs to keep winning and stacking games. So let's look at it as it is. Georgia has to fix some things heading into the second half of the season. A B+ for right now.
Yeah, for me, I think it's all relative, right? I think we talk about the standard at Georgia. Well, if you're looking at Georgia's standard, I think I'm going to give them a B-. Yeah. I think if you look at college football as a whole, I'd give them an A-. It's just that standard, but I think every week you see something they improve on, but you also still see those areas that can be a little bit of concern when you think long-term, whether it's SEC championship or the playoff.
For sure.
How concerned are you about forced fumbles? Because they have none. All of their turnovers have been on interceptions.
Yeah, I'm sure Kirby Smart and the defensive coaching staff are going to really make this a key point during bye week. During bye week, you go back to the fundamentals. You're going to work with your guys in your individual drills. Today, there was an interesting point in the game against Vanderbilt where Marvin Jones made a great play on the ball in the backfield, and Jamon Dumas Johnson went up to him and said, rip the ball out, man. They are making it a point to try to get off the field, give the offense some momentum, and that certainly comes from turnovers.
And this has been going on for weeks. I remember when I was there for the UAB game, they were talking about we don't have any forced fumbles yet, so you can bet your butt at practice that is what they're practicing. It is spooky season, so I wanted to ask a little bit of a scary question. What game on Georgia's remaining schedule has the biggest upset potential?
Yeah, I have to go with Ole Miss here. How they can attack Georgia offensively with a mobile quarterback in Jackson Dart and then an elite running back with Quinshon Judkins who can also get on the perimeter. That is how Georgia has really had its issues on the defensive side of the ball throughout this season. Both of those guys, and Lane Kiffin specifically with his prior success against Kirby Smart, that's a game. I know it's in Athens. For me, that's one that I think scares Georgia at the moment.
I think that's a good one. I think you can also look at the Tennessee game. It is so unbelievably hard to play in that stadium. Tennessee is a good club. They're going to come out firing. It's going to be one of those games, and I think it's really going to be a game that tests Carson Beck as well.
For sure.
I know we talked about that Auburn atmosphere, but that Tennessee atmosphere is a whole other thing as well. The SEC announced its 2023 Football Legends class this week, and it includes Georgia great and Drew's former teammate, Noshawn Marino. He will be one of 14 players honored at this year's SEC Championship championship, Drew, at what point did you just know this guy's different?
Yeah, Noshawn, one of a kind, certainly, and it showed in his consistent elite performances while in Athens. He was a guy that Georgia needs right now, an emotional leader in the locker room during practice, and a guy where when things weren't going great on a Saturday, he would say, give me the ball. I want the ball. He's going to get the guys jacked up. This is so well-deserved of Noshawn, and if I know anything about his post-game celebrations in college, he'll have some pretty good celebrations lined up for that SEC championship weekend as well.
You brought up something about this Georgia team needing a leader, and I want to ask you about that. Whether it comes to accountability or someone to just light that fire, is that ever overplayed in sports?
It's got to be natural. I mean, and that's the key. Like, if there's not a guy on the roster who can fill that void, then Georgia's just going to have to deal with it. Some other guys can step up into that role, and I think that's where Georgia is at right now. I still see it in some of Coach Smart's mannerisms in the pregame press conferences during the week, the postgame press conferences. It's just different this year. Georgia has gone through so much success, losing a lot of their leaders. Somebody's got to step up.
Yep. All right, we're going to go right into ad-libs, another part of this on-the-clock aspect. Your first one, Drew, blank and blank will be in the SEC championship game as of right now.
Yeah, let me get real interesting here and say Alabama and Georgia. I mean, it's just the reality of the situation right now, but Alabama, they have a huge game coming up against Tennessee this upcoming weekend, and Georgia obviously knows what they have to do to make it out of the East, so I would have to say Alabama.
I'm going Alabama, Georgia as well. All right, your second ad-lib. Blank should be the focus during the bye week.
Getting healthy, and Georgia needs to do it in the worst way possible, dealing with a ton of key injuries. Again, they're 7-0. They've gotten halfway through their season. This comes at a great time. Get these guys off their feet, get them in the training room. Injuries are the most important thing that Georgia has to address during the bye week.
I'm going to say forced fumbles.
Okay.
I think they need one. I think they need to work on it. I think it is coming. When it becomes such a focus, they're eventually going to get there. It's just a matter of time. Ad-lib number 3. If Brock Bowers misses time, blank needs to step up.
Carson Beck, because a lot of pressure is going to be on Carson Beck to look around the field, utilize his wide receivers, get some of these younger tight ends involved in the game plan. It's going to put a lot of pressure on the entire offense, but Carson Beck is the leader of that offense, and he's going to have to run the show.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to say Ladd McConkey. I think, yes, he's still dealing with that back injury, so that might be some of it. But as someone who did not cover Georgia last year, but heard a lot about Ladd McConkey and just being one of those weapons on offense, I feel like he's been a shadow of himself.
Yeah, he's so dependable, and he hasn't been on the field, so that's not the best thing for Ladd McConkey.
So I think he needs to step up. Hopefully he can get healthy too during this bye. Carson Beck has the potential to blank.
He has the potential to be a champion, and it's up to him really to take care of the football, get the offense in the right places pre-snap, and execute the game plan. Really, it comes down to not turning the ball over and scoring first. If you look at Georgia's success in the past few years, when they spot that defense, points, the chances of them winning the football game go up dramatically. Score first, start early, don't turn the ball over. Look, it's very easy, obviously.
I'm going to say it has potential to be the best quarterback in the SEC.
Okay.
What I've seen, and I've been hard on him. I think I've been very critical, but he's been so consistent.
Yeah, he really has.
He really has not. Correct. Yeah. He hasn't gotten too high. He hasn't gotten too low. And the more we get into these games, I believe that if he continues to play like that in big games and big moments, maybe this team is good enough where he can lead the way and become the champion you talk about. The final ad-lib. Blank has the worst stadium facilities of all in the SEC.
I mean, look, the Vanderbilt sky shots from today's game, that was crazy. I'm surprised they were even allowed to play a football game in that stadium.
So the correct answer is Vandy, and I want to bring this up. So Kirby Smart did his presser in a trailer.
This is SEC football we're talking about.
Correct.
Yeah.
And on top of that, Emily's interviews that she did were all in like a construction zone. I said, hey, they got you
in
out
a parking lot.
They got you out there shoveling dirt while you're doing your interviews? What's going on here?
I mean, Vanderbilt wishes they could be like Buford High School.
Oh, they wish.
Yeah, I know,
they wish.
I love On the Clock.
It's a fun time. It's a fun time. We enjoy it. It always gives some interesting topics to discuss, and we definitely get to hit those bigger national storylines as well.
All right, so hey, lots of storylines this week. Obviously, UGA off, so they'll be off this week. But the Falcons, they're going to try it again and play the Buccaneers later in the week. So we're going to talk all week about that, right?
Yeah, and Georgia State off to their best start in school history at 5-1 after beating Marshall this weekend. So Georgia teams are we're in the thick of football now.
Yeah, I feel really good for Coach Elliott. He's a really nice man, so nice for them to have a really good bounce back season. So that's been Sports Tonight here on a Monday. Bailey, thank you. I look forward to dueling with you again later on. Later. We're out of here.